Hello, I'm Pat Dennis, and you've tuned into Creative Elk. And today I'm going to talk about Pearl, which I sort of watched as a bit of a double feature last night, in that before going to the cinema to watch Pearl, I rewatched X, which Pearl is a sequel to, or rather it's a prequel to it. I had seen X before, and only last year in fact. The problem is that I watched it as a bit of a movie marathon, and I kind of, having watched 5 movies in a row late at night, I sort of was having trouble remembering where each movie stopped and the other started. They all just kind of blurred together a little bit, so I thought before going and watching Pearl I should remind myself what actually happened in X. So I rewatched that, and it still holds up. Even on the second viewing, it's still really good. It has Jenna Ortega in it, so that's already an instant win. She's fantastic in Scream and also in Wednesday. I didn't expect to like her in Wednesday because, how can you top the 90s performances of Wednesday? But she did a great job, even if the script of the show could have used a second pass over. But no, overall, X was fantastic. If you've not seen it, it's about a group of people going to shoot an adult film on a farm, and unfortunately the people who own the farm are old and insane, and then it's just a bit of a bloodbath. It's got a good amount of violence, it's got a good amount of nudity and smut, and when it comes down to it, that's really enough for most horror movies. If you've got a bit of smut and you've got a bit of gore, you're basically set. But it's also an A24 film, which I laud all the time. They're a great studio. And being an A24 film, not only does it tick the boxes of it being fun and dumb horror, it also ticks the boxes of being well-made, well-shot horror. The cinematography is beautiful. The acting is brilliant. The editing is great. It's just an overall great film. But I do admit that I wanted to see Pearl, the prequel, more than anything out of curiosity, because I wasn't sure how you could make a prequel for that film. There didn't seem to be much you could do with it, and so I just wanted to see what they did do. And before I get too far into it, I want to warn that I'm not avoiding spoilers. That's kind of a blanket warning for this entire channel. I'm just talking about movies, and if you've not already seen them, you probably should. It's more like a book club review of a movie where we just talk about something we've all seen and say what we think about it. So, don't consider it a review. It's just me talking about how I felt about it. So spoilers incoming. But as I said, I went to see it out of curiosity more than anything else, and it's very late at the end of its run. Myself and my friend were the only 2 people in the cinema, which was a cool way to see a movie, to be honest. It was a bit more spooky just being the only 2 people in a giant empty dark room. But I sat down to watch it, and it was insanely good. Better than X. One of the best horror movies I've watched this year, which, it's only April, so that's calling it early, but regardless, one of the best ones I've watched this year. The movie is set in 1914, during World War One, and it weirdly starts off kind of unintentionally funny. At least I think it's unintentional, in that it feels a lot like The Wizard of Oz. The text coming up on screen, saying what actors are in the film and whatnot, looks like The Wizard of Oz text. And then you have her, dressed in farm garb, like Dorothy would be, running up to all the animals, singing, talking about how, one day she's going to get away from this place, and it feels like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I was laughing pretty hard at that. And then weirdly, homages to it kind of continue. I don't know if it's accidental, but they keep popping up, like she's dancing with a scarecrow, and there's of course a scarecrow in Wizard of Oz, and her mother, who she perceives as being very mean to her, catches fire, and she throws boiling water on her, and she gets all, essentially melted, like the Wicked Witch of the West gets melted. So there's some strange homages to the Wizard of Oz in this film, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I kept noticing them. You also have, for instance, the projection man that she gets with and is hoping will take her away to Europe. And it turns out that he never intended to do so. So the man behind the curtain, if you will, was a deceiver, which is yet again another veiled Wizard of Oz reference. So that was, I don't know if I'm just, making these connections myself and they weren't intentional, but they seem to be there, which is curious. And if it is intentional, I don't really know why it would be, because aside from it being, set on a farm in the American South, it doesn't have any other similarities in setting. Like, it's not the right year. The Wizard of Oz came out in 1939 and the book was written in 1900, and this is 1914. So it's not in a setting that necessitates references. But I certainly feel like, whether intentional or subconscious, they definitely seem to be there. And the friend I saw it with also seemed to notice some. So, interesting. That Wizard of Oz tangent aside, the movie is really incredible, and it's carried by Mia Goth, who is making a reappearance from having been in X, where she played the final girl, essentially. She's playing a different character in this movie. She's, of course, playing the titular Pearl. And there was reason for that, because in X, the old woman, Pearl, recognized that Mia Goth's character in that film looked a lot like how she did when she was young. And since it's the prequel about that old lady now that she is young, it makes sense that she's kind of reprising the role almost. So that was really cool. And the movie is just her going off the rails. She starts off insane. Like, there's no point where she's a sane person. She's just batshit crazy. But she just continues to get more nuts and more violent and more unhinged. And it's just fascinating and insane and incredibly entertaining. The entire movie keeps you nervous and a ball of tension, because it's already bad what's happening, but you just know that she's on the edge of getting worse and worse. As far as a pairing between the two films goes, it's actually pretty interesting, them being a sequel or a prequel of each other, because I don't think it would matter what order you watched it in. If you watched Pearl first, it would give you a lot more insight into what happens in X, I suppose. But at the same time, if you watched X first, which is the order in which it came out and which I watched it, you notice all sorts of interesting things into her character as well that make things that happen in X make more sense. So I think both ways are a good way of viewing it. I mean, for one, the tension in X would be far worse if you already knew how insane Pearl was and what drives her and what her backstory is. So I feel like that would make the entire first half of X just way more scary, because you just know what's happening, what's coming. But at the same time, it's just as interesting to watch Pearl second and see all of the things that you're like, oh, that's why she was so angry. There's a lot of callbacks, not in the lazy, nostalgic, you remember when this happened sort of way, but more of just explaining why she's as bad as she is. For instance, in X, one of the scenes in the adult film they're filming has Mia Goth's character, one of the adult film stars, pretending to milk a cow in a sexed up farmer outfit. And then in Pearl, Mia Goth as Pearl is milking a cow in a very similar but no longer exaggerated outfit. And it's just interesting to see that it's that echo of, not only were these people secretly filming an adult film in their farmhouse, but also they were sort of mocking the struggle that her character went through when she was younger. It's no defense of her character and how evil and terrible she is, but it is an interesting explanation into why she's just so evil. Although, that said, she doesn't need the explanation, because as you find out towards the end of X, she was also just already killing people before these people arrived. And as you find out in Pearl, she's been doing it for a long, long time. I think as far as the evolution of serial killers go, they did a pretty natural escalation of what kind of kills she's doing. She starts off by doing an accidental kill against her mother, burning her to death, although she survived for a while, which is like insanely cruel. And then it was just a spiral after that where she's killing more people to cover it up, and then towards the end of it she's just killing people because she sort of enjoys it and is angry at those people. That's a further explanation to her attitude in X. She kills her sister-in-law because she feels that she ended up with an opportunity that Pearl deserved rather than anyone else. And then in X she remarks to her husband, I don't like blondes, which her sister-in-law was. So, you see the root of that hatred just deepening and developing for the first time, which it's just fun and so well written, and I appreciate it so much. I think in general there's no point doing a prequel to a story unless it adds additional insight to the story and the characters, and I think Pearl definitely managed to do this, both with the titular character and also her husband. In X, they're just crazy old evil people who are killing people, and there's not any further reason given to that beyond the fact that they're crazy old bitter people. But Pearl really develops this further and really just fleshes out the characters so much more. For instance, in X, Pearl remarks that if it wasn't for the war, she would have made it as a dancer. But you find out in Pearl that that's simply not true. Despite the war, she did attempt to make it as a dancer and was rejected for not being good enough and not being blonde enough and not being an American enough. So it's not true when she says that she could have made it as a dancer if it wasn't for the war. That's just what she's been telling herself for the last, 50 years. So you can really get an insight into her psyche where she is just self-deceiving. And you see that all the way through Pearl. She's pretending to dance in front of the cattle. She's getting it on with a scarecrow. She's trying to make a new life with this projectionist who she's hoping will take her to Europe while her husband's off at war. You just get... And at the end of the movie, after killing her family, she brings them back to the dinner table and serves them a rotting pig as if, they're having a nice family dinner. So you get an insight that she's not only a crazy, murderous, old woman, she's also been performing this multi-leveled self-deception for the last 50 years of her life. And that's just how unhinged she is. And at the same time, you get an insight into her husband, who's, obviously also evil as hell from his, taking part in these murders and, at the very least, his complicity in them throughout all the time passing between Pearl and X. But he's also, you find out, a bit of a tragic character where, while at war, Pearl went off the complete rails and went crazy and started killing people. And then and she doesn't even like him. She was just hoping to use him to get out of the farmhouse, which he didn't want to do because despite being wealthy, he enjoys farming, which she hates more than anything. And then she admits that she just wants him now for his affection, not because she likes him, but because she wants to be receiving affection. So, unbeknownst to him, for the last 50 years, he's been assisting with this serial killer who doesn't even like him back, which is just wonderfully tragic. As I said at the start of this recording, the absolute best thing about Pearl is Mia Goth. It would have been so easy for her just to be portraying this same character in a different period of time. Mia Goth's character in X, I mean, not Pearl. I mean to say that I could have seen them just taking the character she played in X and turning that into what Pearl was when she was younger, especially after in X, Pearl remarked that they were so similar. I could have seen it just being essentially the same character repeated, which would have been fine, but in hindsight and in reflection of the movie we got, I'm glad they did not, because her portrayal of Pearl is just haunting, and I'll use the word again, tragic, and just so very unsettling. The highlight of the film is not even the murders, even though they are, of course, enjoyable, especially the one where she goes after her sister-in-law with the axe. That's just so fun. But the highlight of the entire film, she has like what I think was maybe a 10-minute, if not longer, soliloquy, where the camera was just zoomed in on her face, up close, and she spoke for 10 minutes explaining to her sister-in-law, who was foolish enough to ask her what was wrong. And it's no cuts, it's just a single take of her explaining that she's worried that she might be insane, she feels like she's crazy, and that she's trapped, and that she hates her husband, and that she cheated on him, and that she also killed her family, and that, the mother is dead, the father is dead, which she feels a little bad about. Also, this random projectionist is dead, and she's crying on camera, and it's all done in a single take, and it's just so well done. And the whole time you're just feeling like this ball of tension building in your chest, because you know that as soon as this speech is done, that sister-in-law is finished, because there's no way she's living after she's been told all of the evil crap that Pearl's been up to. And it's just such a well done scene, and it's so well acted. And I honestly think that Mia Goth is going to be receiving all sorts of Oscars and crap soon, because she's clearly a fantastic actor. And as promised, when that scene ends, the sister-in-law just politely says, "Oh, well, thank you for talking to me, and I hope you feel better. I'm going to go now," and tries to make her escape, not quite as hastily as I think I would have, because I would have been running out that door straight to my car and hightailing out of there. But unfortunately, she was a little bit too restrained in her escape, and she got axed real bad. But better luck next time, I suppose. Unfortunately, I probably left this recording too late, and as of uploading it, I don't think the movie's going to be in the cinema anymore. It was the last few days when I saw it. As I said, there was no one but me and my mate in the cinema, and it was the only screening of the day, and it was playing at 9:30 at night. So I think it's not long for its cinema run anymore, but that's fine. It'll end up on streaming or whatever. And I definitely, if you haven't watched it, it's been spoiled now. I've talked about it at length, but even so, if you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth checking out. Watch it back to back with X, in a movie night like I did, and keep your eye out for anything else that Mia Goth is going to be in, because she's just incredibly good. And that brings me to the end of this video. I am Pat Dennis, and you've been watching Creative Elk. Tune in next time, where I'll ramble incoherently about another spooky movie, or do something else, or perhaps I'll just forget to upload. We'll see how it goes.